All right, and boom, just like that, we are ready to kick off. It is Thursday night. We are the Video Bros. I'm Bobby Munson, and this man beside me, many of you here live in person don't know this, but we call him the man with the angelic voice. He's Papa Smokes. Papa Smokes, how are you doing? Good to see you here beside me for once.
I'm doing great, Munson. Good to do a podcast with you sitting right here. And I'd like to send a special hello out to all the wrestling people out there. We got any wrestling people here?
I think so. We also got ourselves broadcasting live here on our local establishment and our other podcast, the Video Bros Network. So everybody watching in a live capacity online, just to let you know, there will be a Q&A session near the end. So we won't be taking anything during the show. We will get to everybody as much as possible near the end. But as we begin, I just want to mention we want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory. Treaty 6 encompasses the land of the Cree, Dakota, Nakota, Saulteaux, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We are dedicated to ensuring that the spirit of reconciliation in Treaty 6 is honored and respected. Also, anybody watching on the live stream, make sure to let me know if you can hear us out there in podcast land. So, all right, anyway, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out to join us here at Louis Loft on campus. I would like to thank the U of S for hosting this event, and thank you to Anne, Lindsay, and Alicia for all their hard work in making this event happen and providing us with the resources required to present this incredibly special event. As you'll see up on the screen here, this is going to be a various amount of different things that we had scanned in from the Neil Richards collection. We will talk a little bit more in depth about that very, very soon. I mentioned about the Q&A at the end. So yeah, I want to just turn it over to introduce ourselves so that everybody who doesn't know already gets the opportunity to get to know a little about us. But turn it over to you, Papa Smokes. Introduction to you and how you got involved here with pro wrestling.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Papa Smokes. I've been working in the professional wrestling business since approximately 2017, but spent a lifetime watching and consuming wrestling throughout my life. Really influenced by my dad and my older brothers who took me to live shows all my life, and a lot of wrestling watched, a lot of books read, and a lot of thought put into this. So when I met Bobby Munson and we came to do a podcast, it only just fit that we would do it together and spread the word amongst all the people.
You bet, yeah. So I'm Bobby Munson. I've been involved in pro wrestling here in Saskatoon approximately 8 years now. I got involved with High Impact Wrestling. Started off doing article writing for them locally here, and then what that turned into was the development of doing recordings for the live shows and getting involved with the commentary side of things. So we started producing High Impact Wrestling for a YouTube program. And then from there, once HIW started to shut down its doors, we got ourselves involved with Prairie Pro Wrestling. A lot of people might be familiar with local company Prairie Pro Wrestling. And if you are, great. If not, hey, this could be your chance to come join us on December the 7th. We got a show coming up on Saturday, December 7th, and we have got 2 reserved seating to that show that is already sold out. So that is going to be given away here tonight at the show. So yes, my involvement has been, yes, definitely on this side of the fence, doing the video production for Prairie Pro Wrestling, the commentary for Prairie Pro Wrestling, as well as running the podcasts here. We started one with the Video Bros Network, and then we've also taken our show, Ring Respect Radio, over to our new network, which is Our Local Establishment, which features a lot of different people that are in there doing podcasting about various pop culture topics from all across the globe. So giving a voice to everybody worldwide there. But why we're here tonight for this special event, Queering the Ring, which will also tie into a monthly program that we do on Ring Respect Radio known as A Trip Through the Territories, where we talk about the history of professional wrestling in different territories. Tonight, we're going to focus heavily, obviously, on right here in Saskatchewan. So we're going to teach you a little bit about Saskatchewan pro wrestling, as well as talk about diversity, talk about some of the LGBTQ plus community that has been involved in pro wrestling, especially here in Canada as well, too. So I got the show convenient. Yeah, so we got that covered. Yeah, so from there, I got flip my notes. I apologize. Just one sec. Nerves are kicking in. I will get over this by the time we get going here. So, all right. So here's where we begin tonight's show. Going to start off by talking about, of course, Neil Richards, who is the one who donated this amazing collection right here. So Neil Richards was a librarian here at the University of Saskatchewan. He Neil Richards' collection of sexual and gender diversity is one of the largest collections acquired by a Canadian public archive. All of this, which is available here at the University Archives and is available for learning and understanding of the LGBTQIA plus community. Neil Richards was a part of this very massive history that is often forgotten and overlooked entirely. Saskatoon, prior to the 1980s, had a very active gay community, but that got overshadowed when a more conservative government came about that had a focus on, as they called in, traditional marriage. Neil Richards is the reason why the history of the LGBTQ plus IA community in Saskatoon is better known and understood. It is the collection that allows for anyone to better understand this historian and how much he did for this particular city and for the community as well. One of the other collections that Neil Richards obviously has donated is the professional wrestling collection that is available here as well too. He's a lifelong pro wrestling fan, and he has donated everything from memorabilia, magazines, books, programs, all sorts of stuff, including what you'll see up here in various slides as well too, is some of the stuff we're going to talk about where the city of Saskatoon had bylaws in place that were actually there to prevent any diversity really in the sport itself. There was actually a commission and a bylaw in place here in Saskatoon that prevented women's wrestling or women's combat sports in general right up until I believe it was the early 1980s or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. Saskatoon was actually the last of all of the places in Canada to allow women's combat sports to be involved here. And we'll also mention this too, Neil Richards, we also found out his collection was used to create this particular book. Show it to everybody at home, and then everyone there, if you want to come check that out at some point tonight. This book here is called Uncontrolled Chaos. It is actually an encyclopedia of all Canadian professional wrestling history by province. It lists all the different wrestlers throughout the years that have been involved on a smaller scale, how much money was brought into the different venues, and all sorts of stuff like that. So that is a great book. Definitely check it out. Come check that out after the show here as well too. We'd be happy to present that to you. On here. Okay, so there are definitely some names within the history of Canadian professional wrestling that were involved with the LGBTQ plus IA community. For example, but not always in the right way. So a lot of them that were in the community were often not able to express themselves freely within professional wrestling. A lot of the time, they were also used as gimmicks. A lot of the time, the gimmicks were used to create these what we call heel characters or bad guy characters that were then used basically to create, an uncomfortable standard in professional wrestling and stuff like that. And that was then used to really just not highlight the LGBTQ plus community in the proper ways. There's been lots of changes over the years, especially in the last few years that we've seen, but not quite enough. Some of the people involved in the community, Pat Patterson was the very first wrestler in general that was an openly gay man coming out of Montreal. Despite the fact that he was open about this, it was never acknowledged or really thought of by the rest of the crew in the back and stuff in the places he was working. It was often just left alone and buried. So he never really got the acknowledgement for being part of the community like he should. Where are we at here? Sorry. And another name I wanted to bring up, and this one that doesn't get brought up very often, and this came from the research that we started doing here. Sandy Parker is a name for Canadian professional wrestling. Now, Sandy Parker worked in, I believe it was the 1960s, 1970s, that era. She worked throughout Canada, trained by the fabulous Moolah, and then on to work for the legendary Mildred Burke. Went on to win various titles throughout the NWA and stuff like that, and is a presence that should be more known here in Canada, but has not really had the highlight in professional wrestling in general. It's really a name that's been forgotten about and buried over time, and we're really happy to be able to acknowledge her work and her body of work here tonight as well too. From there, it's a lot of the changes that have been made, like for example, it wasn't until about, I'd say 4 or 5 years ago where a gentleman by the name of Fred Rosser, or Darren Young as he's known to many from WWE fans, that came out as an openly gay man in professional wrestling and really started to see this shift in mindset within the community of professional wrestling, where we started to see more things like the Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazines actually highlighting the top list of LGBTQ plus wrestlers and acknowledging them. And we've even had wrestlers here, like our own Rhinestone Cowboy Stephen Crow here, that has come into Saskatoon as a professional wrestler here and been really accepted by the Prairie Pro Wrestling crowd, the Saskatoon crowd. They absolutely love him. He comes out with his pink cowboy hats and does his crowd surfing across the audience. And it's been good to be part of a community that has been so accepting. Like, we kind of have a feeling in PPW where it's like, if you have any animosity or hate or any of that towards anybody, you might as well pack your things and head out the door, because that's not the community that we are trying to create. But to better understand some of the more of this history, I don't want to be the one talking all night, so I'm going to turn it over to my cohort, Papa Smokes here, and see what he's got here to talk a little bit more about diversity and the history of pro wrestling here.
Sure, sure. And if I could, just for a moment, I wanted to say that this project in some form has been kicking around in my head for 8 years now, I think, because in 2016, I was reading a newspaper back when people used to read physical paper newspapers, and I clipped out this article that was about the U of S library, which had just acquired a copy of a book called Thrashing Seasons by E. Nathan Hatton, who was a PhD student back at that time, and he wrote this book on sport and culture and professional wrestling in the Prairie provinces. So being a fan and somewhat a wrestling historian, I always had this in the back of my mind that I would like to read this book and do something with it, because it's such an interesting resource. And back at that time, their library did a little presentation of showing some of their wrestling holdings in the little link between the main library and the P section. I'm not sure what that area is called, but they often have little art displays and stuff like that. And I came down and looked at that. Hatton did a talk, and it was very interesting. I started to realize also when doing research for this presentation that there really isn't much academic stuff out there about the history of sport and wrestling in Saskatchewan. Therefore, Hatton's book kept an importance in my mind as being one of the major sources we could use in this. Yeah, did we have that newspaper clipping there?
I've got it for the audience here.
Okay.
It's not popping up on there, but yes.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I kept that for a long time, thinking we'd actually do something with that someday. So that's a good thing, a good return of the circle around to the beginning, because I wanted to do something. So having said that, for this historical part of the podcast, I'm going to refer to E. Nathan Hatton's book, Thrashing Seasons, fairly heavily. Here's a quotation from that book that I think is worth talking about right here. Wrestling speaks to the propensity for human beings to attach meaning to expressions of physicality that, at their core, necessitate the struggle of one person to gain mastery over another. Isn't that a nice definition of the sport of wrestling in general?
Sums it up beautifully.
Very much so. And I think when we look back upon the history of the prairies and Saskatchewan in terms of wrestling, we're going to see that topic come up quite a lot, because before European colonization, the indigenous populations engaged in wrestling. They had contests between men of physical wrestling to show masculinity and prowess, physical strength. Wrestling to a lot of those peoples showed discipline, showed skill towards war, practical skills which could be used in their life and in their world. So once European colonization started, the English and the French brought their styles of wrestling over, and then we started to see a mixture of the two. This was something that these two differing peoples could bond over in terms of sport and recreation. Excuse me. So that was kind of fun for them at that time. And it started to, wrestling indicated a wider social context in terms of ethnic background and social class and all that too. So we're going to look to the beginnings of professional wrestling as it came to be used as entertainment in the prairie provinces. Now, physical strength, physical prowess, and skill at sport was valued amongst Europeans as well. In the prevailing religion of the time, Protestantism, which was practiced in Saskatchewan here, physical prowess was valued towards a concept of what they called muscular Christianity. Is that about the coolest religious concept you've heard of lately, Munson?
Yeah.
Muscular Christianity, which spoke to a person who was dedicated to physical training, dedicated to an art and a style, progressing in that, mastering an art, and again, the practical applications of mastering a physical skill or art held great value amongst these people. Then we would see as industrialization and as cities rose to prominence, we're going to see social centers such as gymnasiums and taverns start to be important areas of social interaction amongst people, not only in positive ways, but in in negative ways such as gambling and drinking and all that. But these were places where wrestling contests were held in the very beginning, and catch as catch can wrestling came in the late 70s from England and France. That's the term for their style of wrestling, standing or mat wrestling. After 1890, we started to see a dichotomy in the social views of wrestling. It was thought of on one side as virtuous, pertaining to fitness, manliness, and competitiveness, but also thought of by some, particularly the very religious, as morally bankrupt, affiliated with taverns, gambling, and immorality.
Yeah, you bet. One thing I did want to mention, I kind of glossed over here too, and going back to what I was talking about there was somebody that we got, well, I mean, you got to see live. I kind of got to work with briefly as we were trying to step into HIW was Giselle Shaw, and somebody who I want to mention because Giselle has had quite an interesting path in professional wrestling. Giselle, who had come out just recently in 2022, I believe was the time, as a trans woman, had basically not said this or come out for about 10 years being in the sport. And it was at that moment in 2022 that Giselle was at a wrestling convention. And some of the old school ways of thinking, some of the older wrestlers, led to having somebody actually make a comment, a horrible comment that I'm not going to repeat here tonight, about trans people, which then led to a huge backlash within the community of people pretty much canceling, and rightfully so canceling, this particular wrestler from being at conventions or being involved there. And a lot of that just comes from that. It's an old school mentality that's been carried over for too long that, we might appreciate and look at this history, and we're going to cover this history, but at the same time, we got to understand through this view of how things used to be is not the view of where it should be. And Giselle's a shining light in this industry of someone who has stood up and unapologetically been herself, and rightfully so, and a great wrestler, great human being. And I recommend anyone that's not familiar with Giselle to go check out her work. Her body of work is fantastic. Currently working for a company called Maple Leaf Wrestling, but she has traveled the world, been a star over in the UK, everything like that. So Giselle, as we're seeing in the chat, a lot of love for Giselle showing up here tonight. But yeah, Giselle, also a very welcoming name in the community. But from there, Papa Smokes, we want to go into some of the pro wrestling history a little bit deeper.
For sure. Yeah, I can continue with that for sure.
Yeah.
As the as the sport of professional wrestling developed, we started to see the rise of what they called scientific wrestling. This was the guys that knew all the holds, all the reversals, all the little tricks of the trade, and were technical masters of their art. As this started to rise, then more regulations in terms of the rules of the sport started to be put in terms of no choking, no stomping on the ground, no using foreign objects. That sort of thing was introduced into this. But at the same time, it also started that some wrestlers started flouting those rules, right? And trying to cut corners and trying to get away with little things. This is before wrestling matches were worked. This is when they were still pretty much for real. There might have been some fixed finishes at this point, but I don't think too much. So we're starting to get just little glimpses of what we know of as wrestling today, with the technical heroes, the guys who would never break the rules, the guys who would stand up for morality kind of thing, and then the traveling bad guys, the heels that would come in and try and take the shortcuts and try and get the wins, because of course the winners of the matches in those days would get the larger purse of money at the end. So very interesting there. Another,
Oh, and I'm sorry to cut you off there.
Nope.
Something else that you'll see in these slides that you could also see in Neil Richards' archive are going to be a lot of documentation to kind of say what go off of what Papa Smokes is telling us here, is that there was these commissions involved, and these were what they would call the wrestling, boxing, and mixed martial arts commissions. They existed in Regina, in Saskatoon, and all across Canada, and they were setting out guidelines and putting fines upon wrestlers. So you would have these bad guy wrestlers, heel wrestlers, that would go and use chair shots. They would go into the crowd. The things that you would turn on your TV today and watch and think, okay, that's just a bad guy being a bad guy. But back then it wasn't so much the case. And these commissions had the right to fine these wrestlers, and a lot of this documentation will actually show the amount of fines that they did on certain wrestlers, or also a lot of things saying that they were going to outright ban professional wrestling right here in Saskatchewan if the wrestlers continued to disobey these rules. And some of those rules as easy as fighting outside the ring. Something as simple as fighting outside the ring that's commonplace in today's world was very much not looked upon highly by the commissions of professional wrestling.
and it's interesting on that note too, that even before it was out there that there was match fixing going on, some of those commissions didn't know about that, right? Like they were taking it straight up. They weren't, as we call it, smart to the business. They didn't realize what was going on in the background. So promoters and wrestlers had a hard time getting away with their stuff because the commissions would shut them down every time they tried some hot heat, so to speak.
Yeah, they sure would. So to get a better understanding of pro wrestling in Saskatchewan, like we had to do a deep dive. There isn't a whole lot. I'll admit it right now. There's been a lot of wrestling here, but a lot of it comes directly from Saskatchewan. Now, the roots of pro wrestling, though, do run deep here. For example, Stu Hart himself, the legendary Hart family, has the roots here. Saskatoon is actually the home of Stu Hart, where he first was born prior to moving to Calgary to form Stampede Wrestling. And that's why Stampede Wrestling, for the longest time throughout the 70s and 80s, had a very stronghold here in Saskatchewan. They were the territory that existed here in Saskatchewan. Outside of that, I believe we found that there was a couple other smaller promoters that would do little shows here and there, but it wasn't until the 1990s when High Impact Wrestling kind of started rolling through. Canadians Wrestling Elite, which is actually based out of Manitoba, would start running through. And nowadays we've got Ringside Wrestling and we've got Prairie Pro Wrestling. So we've had a very minimal amount of wrestling companies that have really been from directly here in Saskatchewan, but it all ties back Stu Hart. A lot of people don't realize that his roots are deep here in Saskatchewan. Before essentially that was the 1930s that he went to war before becoming a mat grappler and going down to start doing these contests in the U.S. that were fought in opera houses at the time. He would go down there and do what was known as the Opera Cup, and actually Stu Hart would have been the final one to ever win the said Opera Cup before it was brought back modernly in the last few years. But that legend continues on, and people should be highlighting him here in Saskatchewan. And
Yeah, and I wanted to speak just a little bit in terms of wrestling history in Saskatchewan about ethnicity as well, because this was used in the business as a positive and a negative too. Wrestling tended to mirror the changing ethnic makeup of the prairies. For some, it reinforced nationalist sentiments, pride for Canada, and stuff like that. Others, it expressed a desire to preserve their own customs. And wrestling and sport were one of the mediums through which people could express a blossoming sense of national consciousness. So really trying to put an identity on specifically wrestling from your area, in this case, Saskatchewan or the Canadian prairies. Now, wrestling promoted some tensions between ethnic groups. It would take what it could get. Speaking of, for example, after World War I, you saw the rise of these Turks, these Turkish characters that would come in as bad guys, as heels, because that was the enemy of Canada in the First World War, so to speak, one of the enemies, one of the Axis countries. So they were using that, which isn't necessarily a very positive thing, but it was used to stoke the fires of getting people out to watch the shows. But also in a more positive manner, it wrestling encouraged socialization between all kinds of different groups, including class and ethnicities. The various groups would come down to watch and support wrestlers of their ethnicity, and in doing so would end up interacting and socializing with all kinds of different people. So a community being formed amongst wrestling and sports fans, which can only be thought of as a positive thing, especially at this time when there were tensions sometimes too.
Yep. And I mean, speaking on the diversity topic there, Pop Smokes, the province of Saskatchewan, one name who really changed the stereotypes here in Saskatchewan, who kind of left an imprint here and is a legend of the area, is a gentleman by the name of Wavell Star, and I want to acknowledge him here tonight. An Indigenous wrestler that didn't fall into the trap of being told that he had to go with being that heel or bad guy character of the time that so many ethnic groups were forced into being, as a result of that being the understanding of most promoters, that that's what would draw the money. Wavell Star was the complete opposite of that. He became that face character, the baby face as we call him. He was the guy that people wanted to root for. He was the guy that went out there and he changed it for the Indigenous community here in Saskatchewan to be looked upon positively, to the point now where a lot of the Indigenous wrestlers that are coming in nowadays are actually looked upon as the heroes, the baby faces that come in. And that has been a very good change within the world of diversity in terms of the way things have gone modernly. But yeah, Wavell Star is definitely a legend here that needs to be acknowledged, that changed the game drastically.
Very much so, and we've watched Wavell Star over the years, an excellent talent, not just for his groundbreaking moves in ethnicity and stuff, but really was a guy that trained hard, had that discipline, had that drive, and was just plain a better wrestler than a lot of the guys out there. And that's how he really made his way and made his name across Canada.
Yeah, I mean, he's a legitimate tough guy, but he's the nicest guy you'll ever meet at the same time behind the scenes. So kudos to Wavell Star on that one. Gonna go back to you, Pop Smokes. I know you got a lot of notes there on the history, so I'm gonna let you take the mic.
For sure. I'm going to move up to what's often known as pro wrestling's golden age, 1919 to 1929. Now, of course, this is a period of difficult economic strife right before the Great Depression. Things were getting tough out here and all across North America. But what we saw from 1922 to 24 was the rise of what who many people think is the greatest prairie Canadian wrestler ever, Jack Taylor, a local boy out of Winnipeg, a guy with an excellent physique, had all the gifts and all the training and all the moves to succeed in wrestling. So what they did was they started making him the local boy. He was the guy for the prairies, for Winnipeg, but also all throughout Saskatchewan, all the way out to BC. And Jack Taylor started being pumped as the man who was like the guy to beat out in the Western Canada. By 1924, a lot of prairie cities and Canadian cities were starting to get controlled now by the bigger wrestling entities in the US. Big American promoters with lots of money from New York and Chicago and the other big cities started wanting to spread their product out throughout Canada as well. These are untapped markets from a business perspective. They're very interested in exploring this. So there were 3 promoters who really got together and formed what was called the Gold Dust Trio. This was Ed the Strangler Lewis. Everybody knows his name. He was a very, very famous wrestler from the early part of the 1900s. He had a manager, Billy Sandow. You recognize that last name, Bob. There's a million excellent wrestlers with that last name. And then Joseph Toots Mont.
Yep.
You know you're a tough guy in wrestling if your nickname is Toots, right?
Yep.
So these 3 guys had all the power in pro wrestling. Strangler Lewis was the world heavyweight champion all throughout North America, had his manager and then had his promoter, Toots Mont. So what they did was started basically loaning out the world champion to any territories, any cities, any areas that needed a bump, needed some more fans. They would bring the world champion to town. Now the world champion would fight that town's top guy, and they would have a match, and those 2 would put on a show with the local guy coming very close, but not quite beating the world champion, so that all the fans in all those separate cities would say, damn, our top guy just hung with the world heavyweight champion. We are good around here. We do have good wrestlers. We do have talent. Next time he comes, our guy's going to get him. And that's really been a huge formula for pro wrestling all through the 1900s. It's a little bit different these days with internet and streaming and TV rights and all the rest of it. But up until basically the 1980s, this was the formula. You would name a world champion, you would tour him all through the territories, he would face all the top guys, and they would make money and money and money all the way through until that tour was over. It worked for a long time.
Yeah. And admittedly, I mean, if we want to look into Saskatchewan's history outside of promotions like our own Prairie Pro Wrestling, High Impact Wrestling, anything of that sort, I think the only major world championship change that we ever saw here in Saskatchewan would have taken place in the early 1990s in Saskatoon when Bret Hart himself actually won the WWF championship at the time from Ric Flair at a show here in Saskatoon, something that was almost virtually unheard of, especially for a small market, because when it comes to the bigger companies out there, there's kind of a letter grading to how they decide their shows and what stars come here and stuff like that. Saskatoon's actually considered to be a C level. So we're actually at the bottom for the stars that'll come here, the tours that'll come here, and the shows that they'll bring to us. So it was actually a large shock when Bret Hart in the 90s managed to win the championship here in Saskatoon. It was a very legitimate moment for Saskatchewan history.
For sure. Just don't forget, Bob, that wasn't a planned thing. That was Ric
No.
Flair was injured and they had to get the title off of him. So the next show was Saskatoon. But still, a huge moment for this city.
And we'll pretend the injury thing wasn't true, and Bret just is the legitimate tough guy that won that night.
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh, but I know you got a little bit more here to go over, Pop Smokes, before we get to our Q&A section, I believe.
Yeah, a little bit. So after the time where I was just talking about the Gold Dust Trio, the way that the big American promoters were starting to have influence in all the small territories around North America. And basically that's the way it stayed up until the very late 80s. And that's the way Saskatchewan has operated. There haven't been many large promotions that have gone on here, really none. as you were saying a few minutes ago, there have been some small ones, but nothing has lasted all that long, more than 15 or 20 years. So they rely a lot, or we rely here a lot on touring wrestlers.
Yeah.
And while we do create and bring up wrestlers that are Saskatchewan based, we have to have a lot of wrestlers travel in. So just like the business has always been also, it's a lot of wrestlers packed into a lot of cars, and especially with the large geographical distances in out here in the prairies and in Saskatchewan, that's a lot of driving. So it's not easy for those guys, but that's their life.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So like when we talk about Prairie Pro Wrestling, like we do, we have got a certain level of homegrown talent, ones that were here that trained a long time ago that are still kicking around. We've also got the Prairie Pro Wrestling Academy that we started up upon starting Prairie Pro Wrestling. Since then, we've had, I think, 3 or 4 graduates that have actually hit the ring. So local wrestlers that have trained here and are now starting to get their feet wet inside the ring. We've got quite a few trainees now in the works that were working their way through the ranks to eventually get their way into pro wrestling. We've saw just recently with our most recent training camp the largest amount of female participation for women's wrestlers here in Saskatchewan. But yes, we do draw a lot from other communities, particularly the Alberta market. We usually bring in about 2 vehicles, so about 10 wrestlers coming in from Alberta every time to mix things up, keep it fresh and everything. But we are trying to really build a community around homegrown talent here in Saskatchewan, and that is the aim of Prairie Pro Wrestling, is to be able to build the next crop of talent and have them be stationed here so that we can say that's Saskatchewan moving abroad as opposed to always Saskatchewan moving people in.
For sure. And as we've talked about the history of wrestling in this province, there are some moments that aren't that positive. And I think with Prairie Pro Wrestling starting a new company here, we kind of had the idea that we could change with the times and we could update things and we could make it more inclusive and more of a not only a show, not only a good show for the participants, for the wrestlers and the staff themselves, but for the fans as well, where people didn't have to feel uncomfortable. People didn't have to hear things that they didn't want to hear. And yeah, that's the kind of environment that we've wanted to foster in Prairie Pro Wrestling. Something that's up to date, something that's new, and something that's fun for everyone and safe as well.
Yeah, it is a very safe working environment in that sense too, and the fans themselves. Again, we get the okay. You're going to have it in pro wrestling. You've got people that are going to say things that we don't like, but it's not tolerated. We have removed people from Prairie Pro Wrestling shows. We have asked them not to return. We've had the fans flat out remove the people from the shows themselves too, because there's just no acceptance from any of our fans for that kind of hatred in professional wrestling. I mean, we encourage the fans to be loud, boisterous, express their opinions on people they don't like, and some of it's a little naughty at times, but I mean, it's within reason. There's no real hate behind it. It's just them booing the heels like they should and cheering for those baby faces like we've built. So, anything else you wanted to add on the history side there, Pop Smokes?
Not so much,
No?
Bob, but you were saying there's a lot of questions coming up here too.
Yeah, we'll get to the in a second. I just wanted to acknowledge a couple more wrestlers we didn't mention that are from Saskatchewan. One famously, Roddy Piper, a lot of people don't realize because he was made to be from Scotland was where he was hailing from when he would do his wrestling. But he is actually born and raised here in Saskatoon, went on to become a big star of the industry. And a name that not many people are familiar with is Tyler Mane. Tyler Mane, who worked for the WCW in the 1990s, actually went on to movie fame afterwards and notoriously played Sabretooth both in the X-Men, I think, first X-Men movie, if not mistaken, as well as the recent Deadpool Wolverine movie. And he was also Michael Myers in both Rob Zombie's Halloween 1 and 2. So he's a great professional wrestler, also a great actor from right here in Saskatoon. But like I said, that's all I've really got on all of that stuff. I would love to turn it over to Q&A from the live crowd here, as well as the audience watching on our podcast there. If you guys have questions for us, now is the time to get them in. I believe STG is saying he acknowledges my Bret Hart shirt here tonight. So, I mean, that's
Nice.
That's a good start. But yes, any questions that anybody has for us? Nothing? No. There we go. Okay.
It's a weird one. Maybe there's no answer. Is
So-
there any reason why the rumor for years and years and years was that the Undertaker was from Saskatoon?
I like that question. So for any of you at home that couldn't hear that, the question coming about the rumor that the Undertaker was from Saskatoon, and I can clear this up. Evan Hardy Collegiate, if you were to go down there today, you will actually find that there was two individuals that went to Evan Hardy, quite big boys. They were the Caraway brothers, and the Caraway brothers, because a lot of people got smart to what some of the real names of the professional wrestlers were, they mistakenly got the Undertaker's real life name mixed up with Caraway. It's actually Calloway, not Caraway. And they assumed in this assumption that because he had a brother and there was a portrayal on screen in the WWF or WWE of Kane being the brother of the Undertaker, they're not actually legitimate brothers. They're two different names. You got Glenn Jacobs, you got Mark Calloway, and that was where the mistake happened. The Undertaker legitimately not from Saskatoon. So, good question though. I love that.
I also think every town has an urban legend like that too, that there's some famous wrestler from there because, again, before the rise of the internet and all that, where you can look up anything at the press of a button, not much was known about the backgrounds of some of these wrestlers too. So you could make something up saying, yeah, such and such is from my hometown, and nobody could really fact check it.
Yeah, you bet. Any other questions? See if I got any coming in from the live chat. Just a lot of acknowledgments here, mostly. No real questions from the live chat, but what I'm going to do is just for the live people here, we are going to wrap up. We are kind of getting pressed for time on the live feed here, so I am going to wrap up the podcast live here. So thank you to our live viewers, but anybody here that's live with us in person, feel free to keep those questions coming. We're happy to answer anything that you have about any form of pro wrestling. But thank you to everybody who watched live on the podcast online. Thank you for joining us, and that's it for us on there. But yes, again, we'll turn it over to the rest of you. Any more questions that you have for us?
I've got a question for the audience.
There
maybe.
we go. All right.
Is anybody old enough to remember the old Saskatoon Arena? And that's where Stampede Wrestling used to show, the old barn. This is before my time living in this city, but I think it used to be like by where Midtown Mall is now. Is that not correct?
I think so, yeah. I think
Yeah,
right on
yeah.
the mark there. So, yeah.
Lots of wrestling people I know, a lot of them are friends and acquaintances, but anyone that's 40 or 45 and over remembers going to the old barn to see Stu Hart Stampede Wrestling live, and lots of good memories from that.
Really was. More questions? Oh, it's almost got to have something for us. No? Okay, yeah.
So I went to one of your shows.
Yes.
And there was a female wrestler, Zoe.
Yes.
She's super cool. And I love watching her.
Yeah.
She was up against the guy with the longest name in wrestling.
Michael Allen Richard Clark. Yeah. The man with 4 names.
I guess someone who's new to wrestling.
Yeah.
Is that is that normal? Like, do women and men wrestle, or is it between women and women, or is she the only woman wrestler that comes around the league like this?
So we've had 2 in Prairie Pro Wrestling so far. So we've had Turn from Accounting as well as Zoe Sager. Zoe was the first female wrestler that we had here in Prairie Pro Wrestling. Within the Prairie provinces, there isn't a lot of female talent to draw from, which is always the most difficult part. And especially like I said, when we had, I think the last training camp and we had the most female participation we've ever seen, we were very happy about it because we want to see more female talent. As for the roles of intergender wrestling, though, that's a great question. If it goes as high as WWE or an AEW, any of the big companies out there, because of their television deals, a lot of the networks don't want to feature intergender wrestling. So a lot of the time, interactions between the male and female wrestlers is never allowed. When it comes to the independent companies that don't have to worry about those TV deals, we actually very much encourage the intergender wrestling. We believe that, especially some of the talent of Zoe Sager is on the main event level with the rest of our roster. And in fact, it's great you brought her up because WWE has actually started this new program called the WWE ID program, and it's for the independent development. And what it is they're going around and basically making pre-contracts or pre-promises to certain independent wrestlers on the market today, where they go and say, okay, if somebody comes along and offers you a contract before we do, we get to come to you first and potentially sign you ourselves. Zoe Sager is the very first Canadian wrestler that has been ID'd by the WWE. So very likely that Zoe will be making her way to the WWE in the next few years. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That match she had with Michael Allen, she got a few good looks.
I gotta ask. I gotta send the question back to you. There was 2 in a row. So which one was it? Was it the one where they did the table spot at the end, or was it the one before that?
It was the revenge side show.
Okay, it was the table spot one then for sure. Yeah. No, she's a very, very talented, and we're very proud to have her as part of the roster. When she came to us the very first time in 2019, she was brand new. So she is very new to the industry. For her to make these strides, I believe PWI just named her in the top 25 independent wrestlers on the planet right now. So she is somebody to watch for. I don't see. That's the thing. I know certain wrestlers are on the poster. It's always subject to change. If Zoe's available, yes, she will be here for sure. Yeah.
She might be a little too highfalutin for
Yeah,
us now. I'm not too sure.
We had another question though.
I have a question about how wrestlers, when you're interacting with them, they keep a persona. So like with drag queens or drag kings, they have their name, they have their costumes, and they put on a persona. When they're in their drag, they're that person for the performance and when they're interacting with you. Are wrestlers similar to that? Like if you're interacting with them and they're not necessarily in the ring, are they still a heel? Are they still a baby face? Like,
It can depend on which market you go to. So for us, there's to a certain degree, the heels have started to interact positively with the audience after a show's done because they've become very smart to the fact that these guys aren't legitimate bad guys. In fact, I hate to break the fourth wall, most bad guy wrestlers are actually some of the nicest guys you're ever going to be, men and women as well too. But yeah, there's to a certain degree, like kayfabe is what we always called it in the industry, to keep that persona alive. Now that people have kind of seen behind that fourth wall, it comes down a little bit, but there's certain aspects we like to keep alive about it. So for example, when we come to the arena to set up for Prairie Pro Wrestling, I come in and I can guarantee you just about every wrestler you see, that's not their legitimate name that they're working under. So I get used to calling them by their in-ring name when you're at the arena because it's a respect thing that we do. Also, we kind of keep the doors shut to a certain degree. We don't want to see people seeing them practicing performances ahead of time, stuff like that. And once we kind of hit the doors open to the point where the final bell goes of the night, they try to keep within character during those times in particular. But then once we get out and most of the people have, left and stuff like that, it's not outside the realm of possibility that some of the bad guy wrestlers might take a picture with a few fans and stuff like that. But we keep it alive slightly. So, yeah, great question.
But this is different than past years, though, when kayfabe used to be extremely strong within wrestling, the whole sense that you had to keep true to your character and all that. And it used to be not broken under threat of death almost kind of thing because that was how they made their money. If the fans saw a heel, for example, out and about and he wasn't, and he was or if he was acting like a nice guy, then they questioned the whole wrestling show. Is this even real or not? Now, since the rise of the internet, the cat's out of the bag. There's no putting the cat back in the bag. But in the previous days, even the stuff we all watched as kids, they were very, very serious about that. And none of the heel and babyface characters could be seen interacting together, because in the wrestling story, they hate each other, right? So they should be fighting. So those wrestlers never traveled together, never went out to eat together, never any of that stuff. And if fans came up to heels, heels had to be jerks to them and threaten to fight them and all that. And if fans wanted to fight them, heels had to fight them and beat them up, or else they were going to get fired from their job, basically. So it was strong. It was stronger than you probably imagined back then. But like I say, since the internet, it's all kind of out in the open now. That's really the only reason Bobby and I will speak out about that now, is because the rabbit's out of the hat now.
Yeah. And I mean, a more modern explanation of it too was in the 90s, it was even still alive to a degree. Like, for example, Bret Hart himself had a feud in the 90s that lasted quite a long time with his brother Owen. And there was actually stories about, in order to keep the kayfabe alive, and it came to family dinners and stuff like that, Owen and Bret would arrive in separate vehicles to separate parts of the house, come in separate doors, and sit on completely different ends of the table from one another and not speak to each other, on the slim chance that a reporter could come by and notice that they were there for family dinner and break the kayfabe at the time.
And there's a good story relating to that about the Harts too, that when Bret was a child of 9 or 10 years old, his dad and his older brothers and everything, they didn't fill him in on the business because it wasn't any of his business to know. Bret thought it was completely real. All the little kids did. And he was scared of the Stomper. Archie the Stomper was the big, mean, scary-looking heel guy. And Archie would scare the Hart kids at the shows. And at one point he said, "I'm going to beat up your mom, I'm going to beat up your dad, and I'm going to beat up your whole family." So Bret was living in fear of Archie the Stomper. Then he was at home one day. He sees a car pull up, and out gets Archie the Stomper. He's walking up to the front door. Little Bret runs into the house saying, Mom, the Stomper's here. Like, we got to hide. Get Dad. We got to get out of here. Mom just said, okay. Got Archie his check. Archie took his check and left. Yep. Bret said, that's the first time I kind of wondered if there was something up with wrestling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the times when guys got broke into the business back in the day, nowadays we bring people in and they get shown properly how to train and stuff like that. Back when kayfabe was still strong, they had to break them in by making them understand, like, are you prepared for this? Are you willing to go the extra mile to keep this alive? And in order to do that, they a lot of the time would not even tell them that it was staged in any way at first. And the way they would break them in is to break some bones. That was the first rule of thumb, was they bring them in, they'd break someone's leg, they'd break their arm. Stu Hart notoriously would put guys in different mat grappling holds that would put them in pain, and he wouldn't let them go until they legitimately passed out. They had to pass out before he would let them go. There was guys who would sit there in holds for hours before he would let them free.
Yeah, and it wasn't a sense of being cruel or anything. It was a teaching method, a very, very firm teaching method, shall we say.
Yeah, it really was. So, yes?
Through the course of your research with this material,
Yeah.
what were the most exciting or surprising things that you found?
I think it was really the big eye opener to find out just how behind the times Saskatoon was. I mean, to find out how progressive a lot of stuff that Neil Richards brought to the table for the LGBTQ plus community was, and then to also find out how backwards pro wrestling was at the exact same time, and not allowing for, female wrestlers that were established within Stampede Wrestling to even come here and perform or do shows because of the fact that they didn't believe in the idea of women being involved in combat sports here in Saskatoon. It's a shame, but I'm glad that has changed. And like we said, we now can have, diverse matchups featuring, 2 women. We can have men and women. We can have just about anything we want at this point, and we don't have those commissions holding us back or those bylaws that existed here. That was one of the big surprising ones. How about yourself? There was anything in particular?
No. I just wanted to say to anybody that's a wrestling enthusiast or fan out there that this collection in the archives is very, very good. Like, didn't we have a fun time looking through that? And we didn't get through a quarter of it, Bob. There's a lot of stuff in there. Use this resource, build your own knowledge, take some pictures, tell a friend, anything, but there's magazines, there's old Kodak photographs, there's match cards like lineups from wrestling shows, programs, magazines. Some of this stuff is from the 50s, 60s, up to the 90s kind of thing, I guess.
Well,
And it's-
even up to 2015, because they've even got stuff in there from High Impact Wrestling and stuff like that. We actually we were having a good chuckle because they've got I think it was the HIW 2015 calendar, and we looked into this thing, and all of a sudden, wait a second, we know all these guys, but they're actually the older wrestlers on the Prairie Pro Wrestling roster, and there's just these young, nice little baby-faced gentlemen at the time that are just getting new to the business.
Yeah.
And nowadays they're the experienced ones that we're seeing trying to pass on that knowledge to the younger crowd.
But definitely check out the collection if you get over to Special Collections. It's awesome, and set aside a couple of hours because there's a lot of stuff there, and it's really neat to look at.
Couple hours just to get started.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else? No? You sure? You don't want to ask us anything? Well, I mean, thank you everybody for coming in tonight. And I don't know how we wanted to do the draw for the tickets. Oh, randomly chosen? All right. I guess the part everyone wants to do is, okay, so Saturday, December 7th, Seasons Meetings, Prairie Pro Wrestling. All the reserved seating that we have is 100% sold out, but Prairie Pro Wrestling has donated 2 reserved seating tickets, and they have been drawn, so. Oh, there we go. Congratulations. There you go. What I'll do is if you could, before the end of tonight, just provide me with the contact information and stuff like that so that we can get you in the door and we'll have seats reserved in your name. So. Congratulations, by the way.
All right.
And thank you so much for having us and doing this. We really enjoyed it. Sorry for the nerves at the beginning. This is new to us, but we really enjoyed being here and doing this here. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.